how do clinical trials themselves work? What does the process look like? Those involving new medications, and I'm going to focus primarily on that now, are done in a series, generally done in a series of steps. So though this is changing and becoming sort of more of a integrated cycle where you may go back from one phase to another, but generally the trials are done in a series of steps called phases. And this is so the researchers can better understand how the new medications are working in a gradual and safe way. So participants are closely monitored throughout each phase, but the first phases involve a very small number of people. And those results are reviewed and analyzed, including by an independent data monitoring committee and the medical monitors of the study. And before they'll move on to a second phase, often the regulatory agencies are doing a review, or research ethics boards will review later studies from later phases. Why would someone want to think about participating in a clinical trial? Really, clinical trials do help us find the safest options that can deliver the best treatments in the right way to the right people who do need them. And by participating, we can't do this without participants. It really is around our participants who may be healthy volunteers or patients that are looking at clinical trials as a care option. You might help the researchers find out what are the safest options in terms of the treatment, and better understanding how safe the treatment is. Comparing two or more, so you understand which one works better, and that could be something that's routinely prescribed and available right now, and versus a new one, to see, is it actually better, or is it better to stay with the one that's currently available? And by finding new ways and methods to use these existing treatments, we really can look to advance medicine and our understanding. Definitely part of that is making sure that you are able to do clinical trials within populations and groups of the people that the treatment is intended for. That might be in more in seniors care, in pediatric, with children, with adolescents, or even different ethnic populations where we need to understand what this would look like with the population we are hoping to most help. So there are many reasons, again, why you may choose to participate. And some of those benefits may really include yourself looking for treatment. We see this in oncology trials a lot for different types of cancer, where there may not currently be a treatment available that's going to help for that type of cancer, but there might be a clinical trial. So that can open the door either to improve quality of life or to help discover a treatment for future patients. In Canada, we have done a survey of 1,000 Canadians, including 100 parents of people who enrolled their child in a clinical trial, but also the other 900 who participated in a clinical trial or declined. And what we asked them was, what are the main reasons why you participate? And we found the number one in all groups is really to help others. Even if it's not going to benefit themselves, they participate because they're hoping that their contribution will benefit others, maybe going through the same the same situation or same challenges, same conditions, or those in the future. They also talk about wanting to advance medicine and more we know about a disease and treatment, and really helping Canadians to get healthier as a society overall. One of the challenges is really accessing and making sure those trials are available to diverse clinical trial to participants. That is one of the greatest challenges in clinical trials to developing the next generation of treatments. And that includes in individuals with dementia. Their caregivers and healthy volunteers are all needed to participate in clinical studies that are focusing on Alzheimer's and other dementias. Other than funding, that's one of the other ways that we can help. But there definitely are potential risks with the clinical trials. The healthcare professionals that are supervising and leading these trials in Canada for a clinical trial with a new treatment or medicine that is required to be a licensed physician. And then they have a team of other healthcare professionals that are wrap around to very much monitor, spend time with the participants, and put a lot of things in place to minimize those risks. But it is important to know what those risks are before agreeing to participate, and would always encourage you to speak to your own primary care provider or healthcare team about any clinical trial you are thinking about participating in, and to talk to them about those risks. Sometimes it might just be minor, something that has a very, very rare chance of potentially being serious or life-threatening, and that's something we'd encourage you to talk with your healthcare team, also your family, caregivers, other family members, trusted people in your circle. So who can participate in a clinical trial? It's completely up to you. Participants in clinical trials do receive a very high standard of care. They do have additional time and opportunity to talk with study staff, but you should also be continuing care with your regular care providers. Clinical trials are experimental and as a result do always involve some level of risk. But there are ethical and legal codes that do govern medical practice, and they also apply to clinical trials. And we have federal regulations in Canada through the Federal Food and Drug Act, which apply to the conduct of trials. In addition to that, each trial is reviewed and approved by a research ethics board, generally one that's local to the institution where the research is going to be conducted. And through that ethical review and through the regulatory review, but particularly the ethical, there's an analysis of the balance and distribution of the risks to the potential benefits. And that's really key to the ethics of research involving humans. So there is an ethical obligation on researchers to conduct research in a way that's going to protect the participants from any unnecessary or avoidable risks. And for a study to go forward, it really should have a favorable balance of the risks and benefits. And that's what they're looking for when they're giving the ethical approval. Where might you find clinical trials? Where do they happen? Oftentimes people envision them just being in a hospital or some more intensive care setting, but really they happen in many, many different places, whether it's your local doctor's office, definitely in hospitals or medical centers, sometimes in community or public health settings or stations. Sometimes you'll be going to the university or for depending on that. If it's not a treatment, but it might be they're testing a device, for example, maybe they're doing some sort of brain scan, that might be in a university setting. Sometimes even in your own home, more and more to make it easier, reduce barriers to participating. The clinical trial sector really is doing all that they can to try to reach people where they are, to not have to have them come in, to drive in, to take that time to come into a clinic where possible, if things can be done in their home or their local lab or in their local clinic. Who's involved in clinical trials? So who is the team I was talking about? Of course, it's centered around the participant, and that's what we call a clinical trial participant. There's always a principal investigator, or in Canada, they're called a qualified investigator, who is responsible, medically responsible for the participants and the conduct of the study. Also responsible to oversee all of the team that are performing parts of the study or interacting with study participants. Oftentimes, it's the clinical research coordinator who you would see as a participant the most. That might be who your first contact is with. That might be who you're talking to during the informed consent process, at each of your visits. And the coordinator, it could be what we call the CRC, but also could be a nurse, research assistant, pharmacists are involved, and lab technicians as well. But generally, the coordinator is the one that's going to stay with you through the whole journey of the trial. There's a sponsor or funder of the clinical trial, which could be through our pharmaceutical biosciences industry, but could also be through our federal government granting agencies such as CIHR, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. Some studies are done in Canada that are funded by the US NIH, National Institute of Health Research. So there's different ways they can be funded, sometimes self-funded. Clinician researchers may have to fund the study themselves if they want to do within their own care settings and in their clinics. And the Research Ethics Board are involved. So what can you expect when you participate in the trial? It's really helpful, I think, to know as much as possible about what that would look like and to know that there's a process. And all clinical trials do follow a protocol that's determined in advance and approved in advance before participants can be enrolled. So the process would look, you'd find trial, whether through your care provider, whether online, through a specialist, through friends, family sometimes. And the first thing you would do is meet with your regular doctor or healthcare provider or the doctor on the clinical trial team, a member of the team who can answer your questions, really getting the information as much as possible and asking all the questions you have. Next would be receiving an informed consent form to read and understand and then to sign. The challenge with those is they can be quite lengthy. And there can be a lot of other components that are more of a legal or component and not as much about the study. You really need to be able to pick out what those pieces are. And we're working across Canada actually to simplify this, to simplify the forms and to simplify the process, because I would say in the last 20 years, I've witnessed them go from being 2 pages to sometimes 30 pages in that time frame of where we're sitting now. But the idea there is to learn what is going to be happening in the trial, what would you be receiving, what would you be required to do. Then you would, and of course the risks and potential benefits if there are any. There's a screening process that would determine if you're eligible and you can participate in the trial. That may or may not be a physical exam, or it could be just taking your medical history. May or may not be lab tests, and may not have scans. It is all very dependent on the particular study. Once the study doctor confirms you're eligible to participate and you're interested to continue, then at that point you may have additional questions to answer or additional testing that would be done before you would receive the intervention or the treatment. You go through that process. It could be 1-2 visits up to over the course of, and that could be over a few months, up to multiple visits over a number, 2 or 3 years, depending on the trial. And a lot of them will include those follow-up visits.